Hi guys, welcome back to a brand new video. If you are new here, Miracle Population Me. If you're returning, then welcome to our monthly book club event where I talk about the book that I've been reading for an entire month or maybe sometimes even more than that. And I just give you a little bit of a rundown what it's about so you can make a decision if you want to read it yourself. But mainly it's for me to finish the crazy amount of books that I have and I just need to get it over with. So I'd rather do it as a YouTube video than read it on my own time for no reason. And today, the newest book of the month is called The Sherlockian, which, as you know, is a book that probably relates back to Sherlock Holmes. So, per usual, I will give you down the rundown of the summary of the book and give my thoughts, and very much try to do that at the very end so that it doesn't combine together and you guys know exactly what it's about. And yes, there is spoilers, so if you don't want me to spoil the entirety of it, you probably want to stop here, unfortunately, for me. But let's get into it. So The Sherlockian follows a fictional story of this group of Sherlockians that believe that Sherlock Holmes was like the truther of all detective stories. Think of it as like your highly advanced book club for like your favorite author, and 7 authors for Sherlock Holmes. So if you really like Jane Austen, for example, and you have like a monthly book club to talk about Jane Austen's work and everything that she has and how it means in this current society, they do the same thing for Sherlock Holmes, and yes, it's all male. So it takes place in LA where this character named Harold is a newly joined Sherlockian, which is just a new person that, I don't know how to explain it. Like, you graduate into the world of knowing so much about Sherlock Holmes that we can take you into our fold. And what do they talk about? Sherlock Holmes. Literally, that's all they talk about. But this story is split into 2 different timelines. There's a 2010 timeline of Harold and his life of what's going on within the Sherlockian, and there's a 1900 timeline where it talks about the real life story of Arthur Conan Doyle and his time after he essentially kills off Sherlock Holmes and how that's been in his life. But let's start with one person at a time so it doesn't get too confusing. We're going to start with Harold because his story starts first. He gets to join into the Sherlockian, and during his time, there's this character named Alex Cale, and he is said to have found the missing diary of Arthur Conan Doyle. That is the missing diary that Doyle wrote right after he killed off Sherlock Holmes. He was at the end of his life. He made one last book about, I assume, his own life, or maybe more about Sherlock. No one knows. And that has been missing for like over hundreds of years, and no one has found it. And Alex Cale said he found it, which means that he's going to present it to the Sherlockians monthly ceremony, basically, right? And they make a big show out of it. Everyone comes in who's invited to it, and they all want to see Alex Cale. And Harold is in the audience waiting for him to show up and show up this diary, because that's the biggest mystery of anyone who is in love with Sherlock Holmes and the author himself. Unfortunately, he never showed up to the ceremony that he actually presented. He orchestrated himself, and it takes Harold plus a woman that claims to be a reporter named Sarah, and they go down to his hotel room where they assume he was still in for like hours, and they try to get in there only to find out that he has passed away and is dead in there. And unfortunately, he's been strangled. And the diary is also not in his room, and his hotel has been a mess. So obviously the police are called. They're wondering, okay, who killed this man? It could have been anyone in this hotel or in the ceremony. So it could have been Sherlockian, it could have been a random person, because who would care more about a missing diary than someone who's in love with the author or the character? And so it gets into a spiral about who is doing what, and fingers are being pointed. And Harold is being talked to by Sebastian Conan Doyle, who is like the great-grandson, I think, his great-grandson, I'm sure, of the original author. And he wants the diary to sell it, I'm sure. But he wants to employ Harold because he thinks he might be the best bet for finding this diary. Now, why Harold? There's no real good reason at first, because he is a very much new person, but because he's so new to the fold, he wouldn't have known who Alex Cale was before that day. And he definitely wouldn't have known that the diary was going to be in the hotel without having to have previous knowledge or talk to someone who's been in the organization for a lot longer than he has. And also there is Sarah, who is a reporter and wants to report on the Sherlockians' information because they are very much kept secret from the public knowledge of what they do. And she'll be one of the main people who will break that story. So of course she wants to know what is in the diary, because everyone and their mama will want to know, I assume, right? So Sebastian is like, Harold, go figure out this case, whatever. So he goes over to London/Britain with Sarah, and they go to where Alex Cale grew up in, They didn't find a diary. Long story short, they didn't find a diary there. They go to his sister's home. They find out more about his personality. They find out more about how he found his diary, but seemed depressed when he found it, and maybe even didn't know anything about what was going on. So his sister said he looked so happy when he was on the journey to find it, but when he claimed to have found it, he was very distant, very turned off. He was not the happy person you would expect someone who would win the lottery, for example, to have been. So that was also the last time she saw him before he came to America and then later on passed away. So they checked his workplace because that was the very place that he actually wrote his own diary, because he also, Alex Cale, was an author of his own writing for the history of Sherlock, I'm sure, right? And they go there and find out his place has been ransacked, it has been destroyed, and someone is leaving the building, running away. So they go after this person, Sarah and Harold. They're trying to go figure out if this man has a diary and what's of it, right? Long story short, this man thinks they have the diary because even though the place was ransacked, nothing was taken, because the diary is not in his workplace either. And the person who ran out of the room has a weapon on him. He has a gun. He's actively trying to figure out not only who has it, but if he can take it from them, and think Harold and Sarah have it. So it was a long goose chase around the city of London where they basically were like, we don't have it. And they were like, okay, great. But the guy didn't stop following them. It was a long story. But long story short, they do find a library where Alex Cale does frequent it many times. It has a lot of the letters that Arthur Conan Doyle had written to his best friend at the time. Bram Stoker is famously known to have written Dracula. So they were best friends back then, and they written letters a lot. And during the time, it seems like there was a lot of letters missing from Arthur, but a lot of letters were seen from Bram. So Bram had written letters to Arthur, but any letters that was written from Arthur to Bram was destroyed by Bram, because Bram was the only one who kept his letters. And in those letters, it seemed to have been claiming that Bram wanted to go over to Arthur's place and assisting that should occur, right? So of course, Harold is wondering, why does he want to do all that? And does this diary actually exist? Because at this point, no one knows what this diary is. No one is coming out of the woodwork saying, I have a diary, let me sell it. No one seems to even know this diary was even in Alex's possession to begin with. So Harold gets an idea. He starts to look into his workplace that was ransacked, figured out that a lot of Sherlock lore, whatever, there's probably 3 big books that was supposed to be in his workplace because Sherlock said so, whatever. I don't read a lot of Sherlock Holmes, if you haven't noticed, so a lot of it did not go over my head, but I was like, for sure, you have to be like a fanatic to really understand a lot of what was happening. But he did find there was one book in the trilogy that Sherlock would have written or something that was missing in Alex Cale's workshop. So they go to the library to go find it, because if anywhere is going to have it, it will be a library. It was a book about birds, but it needed to be a specific book about birds because it needed to be written in this time period of when Arthur Conan Doyle literally had been alive or whatever. That's why I'm saying it's for fanatics. It's only they will truly understand how this all relates. They find a book, okay? They find a book. Inside that book was a letter from Alex Cale from before he passed away. In a letter, it basically gave you a whole section of like, oh, if you found this letter, then congratulations. Then you are the so-called winner of the idea of what really happened. And to tell you the truth, not only did I not find this diary that I claimed to have found for who knows how long, I also ended my own life in the process because I wanted you guys to figure out the real truth. And the truth that Alex Cale wrote in that letter was that the diary does not exist anymore. It actually has been destroyed for like over 100 years. And the story of that is because when Arthur Conan Doyle originally wrote the diary before he passed away, his best friend Bram Stoker actually found that diary and so-called destroyed it, which meant that there was no copy, but because no one really knew that he destroyed it, people assumed that it was just taken and was misplaced and no one found it for hundreds of years or whatever. And when Alex found out about that, obviously that's his life work, that's anyone's life work if you really care about Sherlock Holmes. And he realized he needed one big last hurrah before he goes out. So what's a bigger hurrah to figure out how you died when you're also a big figure in the world of Sherlockians, right? So that's what really happened, and that's what the letter described. So, of course, Harold was disappointed. Sarah was disappointed because she can't write about something that doesn't exist, right? They didn't tell Sebastian because at one point they assumed he killed Alex because it seemed obvious they had beef, but he also wasn't a good person, so it's like, how are we going to tell him about this and have him believe us? You know, whatever, right? But They didn't really agree with the idea, so they never told Sebastian. But the diary does not exist, which means the goose chase that everyone's looking for does not exist either. And because of that, Sarah went home because she has no reason to be there anymore. Harold went drinking, right? And then later on, the librarian came to talk to him, asked him like they find what they needed. He said no, turned out it was all a fake. He wanted to keep it a secret just because the idea that the diary is no longer existing seemed like a very sore subject for anyone to find out if you're a big fan, and it would not be like the best thing ever. But he did tell her, and she told him like there's more letters to be written that was actually talked about between Bram and Arthur that you didn't see, because no one made the connection when other people read the letters that, oh, the diary is destroyed. Then why is Bram so adamant about going to Conan Doyle's place? And Harold makes a connection like, oh, wait a minute, let me read those letters. He reads the letters. The letters basically show off that Bram is adamant to go to Doyle's place, and Harold's able to put together he would not be adamant about going back to a place where he destroyed the man's diary unless he never destroyed a diary at all, and maybe he hid the diary in order to destroy it later. And so Harold finds out, oh, it's actually been hidden. It's probably been hidden in Doyle's place in his former house. Obviously, the former house is no longer the same as when it was in the 1900s. It's actually a museum at this point, and it's also been like bare, so there's no proof that anything in there could have held a diary even if he wanted to. So he had to figure out where the items went so that he can actually go and find this diary. And they're all in this one museum that held all his stuff. And he went to that museum, which is, I think, London. I know I said London before. Everything's in London, so we're gonna stick with that story. And from there, he was able to find this one, they call it like a gargantuan or something. It's like a really big box that's heavy. He broke the box, and there lays a diary inside that box that no one knew about because no one had thought that he would have been hidden in his own home, especially when he thought it was destroyed himself. And so from there on, they actually found the guy that was trying to kill Harold at the beginning of the story. He was there as well, and he wanted the diary really badly. So he found out he had a diary, found him out, everything was terrible, right? Sarah came out of nowhere, had her own gun, went to that Harold, and it was like, oh my gosh, she's on the bad side, whatever, right? Turns out her name is not Sarah whatever, as I've been saying this entire time. Her name is Sarah Conan Doyle. She is the wife of Sebastian / ex-wife because she is in the process of trying to get divorced. But with this new information, Harold does believe that she's on the bad side and does want the diary to herself. Long story short, they defeated the guy who had the gun. They basically knocked him out. They took the diary and they ran before the police got there, which is hilarious. Where are the cameras? But at the end of the day, they did get the diary. They never told Sebastian. They never even told him anything. He actually never even knew anything like this was happening, which is kind of funny. She did apologize a lot. I think he never really truly forgave her because it was like, why'd you lie? But also they had a diary. So they took the time to read the diary. And what's in that diary is part of the second part of that I'm going to go into. But once they read that diary and they knew what was actually in there, Harold realized this entire shabacle of looking for a diary, especially with, someone having to, end his life, and the whole back and forth of what was in it, it wasn't worth the diary. The diary was good. The diary had information about Conan's life that was not in any other book, but it was so sad that it wasn't worth having to find it. So Sarah threw it over a waterfall because they went to a waterfall that Sherlock essentially died on. Yeah. And they never talked about it again, but they reconciled with the fact that they had a lot to make up for, because there's a lot of Harold has never been a part of a chase. He never had a gun in his life pointed at him. So for all that, it definitely was therapy was needed for sure. But they definitely made sure to work on it with each other. And that's where their story kind of ended. So let's talk about what could be in this diary. But to talk about that, I need to do the second part of Arthur, we can call him Arthur, Arthur's storyline. This book takes place in 1900, right after Arthur killed off Sherlock Holmes. Everyone's sad. It's like a sad day. You think the Queen's died or whatever in London, which is almost how it really happened, I think. But Arthur is trying to move on with his life. He's not trying to write Sherlock. He thinks Sherlock became bigger than him, which is not what he wanted, because he is a renowned author. But if your whole work is defined by a person that is more famous than you, you might want to kill him, Especially when you're trying to make other books and no one cares because they only want more about Sherlock. But it'd be like that sometimes, I think. But he basically wants to live at home. He has a family. He does his own life. and he gets a letter bomb in the mail, and it blows up. No one gets hurt, but it's obvious that it's like bad enough to be like, who did that? Why did they do that to me? He goes to Scotland Yard. They don't really know, nor do they seem to really care to pursue it, even though they're big fans. He's super famous. He's a celebrity. But they don't seem to know or seem to want to push it because they don't really think it's a big deal, because they're like, oh, you're alive though. And it's like, I guess that's the sentiment of Scotland Yard. So he figures out, I'll just be my own detective, which is ironic considering that he's never been a detective outside of his own books, but he does anyway. He does it with his best friend, Bram Stokes. And they figured out through a whole bunch of reading, because you kind of have to read the whole book to be like, oh, how did he go there? Basically, he found out the people that sent him the letter, or the letter bomb, was a woman named Emily something. Her name was Emily, and she sent the letter bomb because she needed his help in finding out how two of her other friends were murdered. These other two women that were part of this women's suffrage group of the early 1900s, because women didn't have a lot of rights, they were murdered, and they all had the same tattoo of 3 crow heads. What's a crow head got to do anything? Nothing. It just has a symbolism with them all being in the same group, and they just kind of have it. But it shows that if you have it, then you're probably a target because you're all part of this women's suffrage group, which was not a very big popular thing for everyone, right? And because of that, she wanted his help and has written letters in the past to get his help, because I guess she couldn't go to the police for real. Because I guess the police is just not liked, and Arthur is a lot more liked, and people assume he does real detective work, which he's never done, ironically. And so she sent the letter bomb to him. Now, what she doesn't know is that he already looked into the 2 deaths before this, because it was one of the only ways for him to figure out who she was. And he already knew that 2 of the women that were actually murdered came from different backgrounds, different storylines, but they were killed in the same similar fashion, where they both had a wedding dress on in some random hotel in the wrong side of town. And both of them were seen with a taller man who they seem to have never seen, like they were never with this man before, and then they were getting married and now they're dead. And it does seem as if whoever killed them may have known them, but also was luring them to their death. And with Emily saying that, oh, my friends are dead, this and that, I sent you a letter bomb, he was no longer trying to care about the deaths of these girls, because now that he knows the truth and he knows that this whole thing was a ploy for him to get to help him, which honestly could have hurt him, right? A letter bomb is still a bomb. He said no to her plea for help. He actually didn't even like her, because to his mind, he doesn't mind the women's suffrage. Like, he's not against it like a lot of people are, but he doesn't like the idea of being threatened in that sort of way in order to get help, even though it was the case of a bunch of murdered women. So he left. Yeah, he was able to leave her house, and she wasn't trying to kill him again, which she did have a gun, but she didn't use it. The next day, he finds out that she actually did get murdered by the same guy who killed her 2 friends in her own home, and she was strangled in this way. So no one had to lure her to anything, because she already had an idea that they were being lured into this. And he went to the police to be like, I know who blew up my place. It's this Emily girl. And they were like, well, Emily's dead, and you're the last one to see her. And then he was like, oh shit. He was allowed to go to the crime scene because celebrity status. And they didn't actually accuse him of anything until he almost hit the commissioner of the group, who was really new, because he was upset with the idea that they could think he can kill him. So he hit the commissioner in the face. The commissioner put him in prison for a day. Everyone was apologetic because they know who he is. And he was able to leave the prison. He never wanted to go back and figure out who killed the girls, right? Because he just didn't care. In his mind, everything happens, not for a reason, but the world keeps spinning, and the next death that happens will knock on his door, and he doesn't want to be a part of it. Because if one thing leads to another in this huge case, is that he does not want to be going down a rabbit hole. Who killed these women? Who is willing to do all this crime, and how is the police not giving a shit? So he just thought, I'm not going to work about it. I'm going to make more books that's not Sherlock Holmes and do my life. A week goes by, and he essentially, I don't know how this happens, but he goes back into the crime case, because in his mind, it is almost like who did kill these women and how are they getting away with it? Because a week goes by, nothing happened. So he does look into his best friend, Bram. They were able to figure out that there was this guy who printed newspapers, and he had a lot of ink on him. And he didn't make the tattoos on the girls. He was able to figure out where those girls were coming from who had the tattoos. And apparently he was a huge misogynist and also hated women's suffrage and definitely hated women. He hated women. And because of that, Arthur kind of tried to like be besties with him to get him to confess, which he kind of did get him to confess, but the police doesn't believe him. Like, of all times to not believe him, this is the time to not believe him. And he was told to let it go because they really weren't going to look into it, which is, I don't think that's what they said, but it's how they were reacting to it. And then he basically went back to the guy. His name was Bobby Singer or Siger. Anyway, point of the matter is, they go back to his home. This Bobby guy, they go to his home. They try looking for evidence that can prove that he actually murdered these girls, because at this point, it's anything that they can get their hands on. Unfortunately, Bobby does get home pretty quickly, and he comes into the window, I guess. I don't know, kind of weird. Anyway, he's a murderer, so who knows? But he comes to the window. He thinks that Arthur is there because he's trying to help him. I don't know why he thinks that to this day, but he did think that. Arthur hated the notion that that was even the case, pulled out his gun because he really did not like the guy, because murdering women is like, you shouldn't murder anyone, right? But like the way he murdered those women was like, he hated it. Like, you could, like, serial killer vibes. That like, this was not execution style, it was the pain of what he hated of women he put on them. And because they pointed the gun towards him, they had a little fight with the gun. He did shoot Bobby in his cheek, so he was like, oh, you're trying to kill me for real. Bram also had a gun. He was able to kill Bobby for real. So Bobby was able to like actually die in his own room. And they were like, we gotta leave, we just killed this guy. Unfortunately, at the door, he had a sister, and she was hit with a stray bullet from Arthur's gun, which hit her in the neck, and she was bleeding out to death. Unfortunately, they couldn't help her because one, she was dying really quickly, and two, what are you gonna tell them? Like, oh, I just happened to come here and she was dying. No, they're gonna believe you killed her, especially with all the things they were doing anyway. Like, I don't think the celebrity stats would have worked anyway. So at this point, they left. They figured out that he was the killer. They didn't tell the police that it was them. The police did get the bodies out, but they never connected the death to Arthur and Bram. Not shared their evidence. I don't know. I think the Scotland Yard is kind of ass, in my opinion. But in this case, they go back home. They don't talk about it. They seem to not even want to remember that he killed someone, even though Bobby did deserve death in this case. The sister didn't deserve death. She didn't even know what was going on. She just happened to be at home. I don't think she knew the crime. So her death was accidental, but it did happen still. And so after a while, Arthur starts to write in his diary. He writes that he writes down the evidence of the crime, what happened, what led to it, all of it. Because he is depressed. I'm sure he's doing it because it's like a journal. He also tells Bram he's writing more Sherlock Holmes. This is around the time where Sherlock comes back alive and all that good stuff, So he tells him he's writing more Sherlock Holmes. Bram is like, great. But he also told me he's writing his diary for his own, it's for his own self. And Bram is like, you can't do that. He's like, it's for me though. It's not for anyone. Like, I'm writing this diary for myself. Somehow, some way, Bram is up in a tizzy and it's like, you really can't have that diary because that could implicate both of us of murder, which obviously, right? And he takes the diary from Arthur without him knowing, hid it, told him he destroyed it. Reality, he left it in his house because he didn't have time to really take it. And since then, he's been trying to get back into Arthur's house to get him to like hash it out with him, whatever. In reality, he's trying to get the diary. The diary never goes to Bram, clearly, because it stays in his house this entire time. And Arthur 100% assumes that Bram destroyed his diary, which is like, why would this man go around, But yeah, so what was in the diary was literally the entire case of him going from finding out these girls were murdered, going to see Emily, having to find out that she ends up dying, having to find out who really killed them and having to kill him and accidentally his sister as well. That is all written in this missing diary that Harold and Sarah read later in the story and eventually throw over a waterfall. So that is the missing case of the diary. There is a quick excerpt at the very end of the book because this book, as I said, is fictional in a lot of cases, but some parts of it is real according to the author, which, so what's real about this book? The Sherlockians do exist. It's a real organization, I assume. They are very secretive about what they talk about, but I guess they do give little tips and tricks about what they do a little bit. I'm not sure if you guys care about that, but they do exist. The missing diary that Arthur Conan Doyle is having is real. It's also real. No one knows who's in it because it's actually missing. It is a missing diary. No one knows who's in it, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's one of the many things that were missing from him. Like people were missing letters from this man. I don't know. Someone stole it or someone destroyed it. I mean, it's paper, right? I doubt it's gonna be surviving hundreds of years. The story of the murders are fake. The story of Harold actually finding anything is fake, obviously. The story of Sarah is fake, obviously, right? Sebastian, is he real? I don't know. He has a family name of Sebastian that wasn't talked about, but the diary is real, and the organization of Sherlockians are real as well. So that is the entire book of The Sherlockians by Graham Moore, who lives in LA actually. He used to live in Chicago, which is quite interesting. Okay, so that's the summary. It's a really long summary because I have to split into two parts, which, you know, did overlap a lot because every other chapter was the other story, but I didn't want it to overlap in my story because it's just, no, I'm sorry. I'm already struggling sometimes to like talk cohesively. I'm not about to do that for this book when the book itself was not confusing, but definitely wasn't my favorite. So let's talk about my opinion. I overall did like this book. I will say my first initial thought about this book was that it'd be more historical and more real in terms of what really happened with Arthur Conan Doyle and Rand Sherlock or whatever. I think this way was also fine. It was good. I think at some parts I was like struggling to want to read more because it did kind of feel a little stale because it's too historical in terms of like, let's learn more about Sherlock and use these details from the books that was written about him to solve a case. It just seemed too, not cringy, but a little bit off-putting. It's like, I wouldn't go into a crime scene and be like, oh, I watched a bunch of Detective Conan. I'm definitely gonna solve this case. I mean, I might, but I'm not gonna keep telling you that. You know what I'm saying? I just kind of felt like I know it's elementary, it's a funny word to use in this setting, but it's very elementary how they were going about it. And I think it was fine overall. I wouldn't personally put it in my top 10 books that I've read so far. I don't know what my top 10 books that I read so far are, but this is not on it. It's better than it's better than The Daughter of Fortune in some ways because they kept giving you too much historical facts in between a fictional story. So it was like, I don't know why you're doing that. You're just like throwing my attention off. But I think this book, because it was shorter, gave me more to work with. So if you want to read this book and you know a little bit about Sherlock Holmes, you might like this book. I don't necessarily think you gotta be a huge fan of him to understand it. You might get more references than I did, but like I've read it, I've watched several TV shows about it, and it was okay. I mean, I don't know what's the point of making a fictional book if there's like a real life diary going missing, but I guess it was more of like what happened if it was real or whatever. It was more of like a what if storyline, which I like what if storylines. But was it what I expected when I picked it up from the library or the bookstore I went to? Not really. I don't think so. There really isn't much of a synopsis either, but I would give this a 6 out of 10. It wasn't terrible. I definitely do like the artwork that's on it because the question mark with blood on it. It's like, who did this, who did that, why this, why that? And there's blood because people do that. And it's very pretty, and it's literally in the shape of his cigarettes that he smokes, which is a nice catch I just found right now. So a 6 out of 10 for sure. Let me show you guys what's on the other side of it. It's actually so cool. It's Sherlock Holmes. Wow, that's cool. I like it when it's hardcover sometimes because I do get to see artwork like that you don't see with like a paperback. So yeah, I'm happy to be done with the book. Now I know more about it. Now you guys know more about it. You guys can also talk about it and see if you are going to pick it up yourself. So let me know in the comments, would you read this book yourself? Did I do a good job explaining it to you guys? Do you guys even care about these books? Let me know what you want me to read in the next video because honestly, I might just go pick up more books just because, you know, I have books I have to read. I'm kind of itching to like just pick up more just for the thrill of it. And you know, I get them for free, so I lose no money in this. But thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe. So you have a new update from me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.